Hi, I'm Erik Voss, and as we still recover from Game of Thrones Season 7 finale, we're left with the mystery of who will survive the end of the series. We know you promised all men must die, but, you know, which ones? We are gonna have plenty of time to speculate and theorize between now and sometime in 2019, when the final season is expected to air. Also, we just learned HBO is gonna make it even harder to predict how the series will end by shooting multiple alternate endings. God damn. Popular TV shows have been known to do this so that even the cast and crew won't know the real ending. They did it on Lost Season 4 with which character was in the coffin, and recently on The Walking Dead with alternate footage of Negan killing off all the other characters. So with no possible leaks to guide us, let's fly blind in predicting whose watch will end in the final season of Game of Thrones. Now, this conversation can't just be about bloodlust. With Game of Thrones, deaths of primary characters need to have meaning, like they must be a natural consequence of a character's mistakes or flaws, or more of a thematic game changer, like the world has changed so much that there's no longer a place in it for a character, and their deaths signal how much the survivor's world is different. Okay, so these are the remaining core characters of the show. Daenerys Targaryen, Jon Snow, aka Aegon Targaryen, Sansa, Arya, and Bran Stark, Cersei, Jaime, and Tyrion Lannister, the Night King, Theon and Euron Greyjoy, Sir Davos Seaworth, and Samwell Tarly. Now, of these, George R.R. Martin initially planned for at least 5 of them to survive at the end of the book series: Jon, Dany, Arya, Bran, and Tyrion. But that was just his plan in the original outline for the books, which were only going to be 3 installments, and this was long before the show existed, which changed a lot of Martin's original intent. So, assuming any of the main players can go, whose behavior has made them worthy of death in the show's eyes, or whose deaths would reflect a crucial shift in the world of the show? Obviously, Cersei Lannister is at the top of that list. In my other Season 8 predictions video, I explored how her complete lack of a soul and her refusal to take the threat of the White Walkers seriously could lead to a scenario where she's shivering on the Iron Throne, ready to poison herself as a Night King closes in on her. Also, as the top game player of Game of Thrones, Cersei doesn't seem like someone who'd be fun to see in an existential ice battle. Like, just imagine the game changer of the Night King plunging a new frozen sword into the Iron Throne, freezing and shattering it. The game would be over, and so too would be Cersei's purpose in the show. The only way Cersei could survive the final season is if Game of Thrones ends up restoring itself as the political drama it was in the first couple seasons. By allowing her to live, the show would say, hey, common humanity is important and all, but this is a world where absolute treachery is the most important thing in life. I guess I could see Game of Thrones ending as a House of Cards style cynical downer, but I doubt it. This has become a show about ice zombies and dragons, and Cersei is not long for that world. Jaime, meanwhile, may face a different fate. Yes, his actions in earlier seasons made him totally worthy of a death sentence, but you could also argue he's done a lot to redeem himself. And now that he's left Cersei behind to face the threat up north, I definitely could see Jaime playing some role in the war to come. Now, I've speculated in past videos how Jaime might end up fulfilling the Valonqar prophecy from the books as the younger brother that will kill Cersei, and some crazier theories have posed that he could be the prince that was promised. And of course, we all want to see Jaime fighting Tormund for Brienne's love and the two of them growing old together. Honestly, I think the biggest obstacle to all of that for Jaime is Bran. Remember, Bran definitely used his three-eyed raven powers to sentence Littlefinger to death, so yeah, if Jaime ever makes it to Winterfell, he's gonna have some splaining to do. But I think with a heartfelt apology or some kind of heroic rescue, it's possible a reformed Kingslayer could end up surviving this series. Now, speaking of Bran, I don't think he's gonna die in the final season. Rather, I think Season 8 will finally show Bran coming alive. If you think about it, Bran has been too passive of a character for these past 7 seasons. I think the show has been waiting for this final supernatural battle against the Night King to finally unleash Bran's full powers. For example, warging into dragons, or flying through time, summoning an army of weirwood trees to come alive and smash everything like Ents in Lord of the Rings. That's something he can do, right? Bran has just suffered so much as a child, and I would just be really surprised if Game of Thrones decides his whole purpose in life is to just use his mind powers to help his family fight a war and then die prematurely. No, Bran's gonna grow old. Maybe old enough to be that same three-eyed raven figure who spoke to him as an old man, because that could totally be Bran, because the show never established him as Brynden Rivers, the Blood Raven. That's just something from the books. Just think about it. Now, Arya, I'm less sure about. I know George R.R. Martin has said that he imagined Arya being there in the end, but her story arc has never focused that much on the White Walkers. I just can't see what role she would need to play in this war to come. Sure, she does have that Valyrian steel dagger now, and maybe she'll end up using it on a White Walker as it invades the halls of Winterfell. We gotta admit that Arya is totally a survivor and would still be pretty deadly in the Winds of Winter. But just like Cersei, I could see an ending of Game of Thrones that no longer needs a vengeful assassin crossing names off her list. Arya's goals remain short-sighted. Her character's never been about the future or settling down. She's much more exciting to see as this driven killer. So I predict that her story will end with one last kill that ends her own life too. Maybe a suicide assassination mission against Cersei, or like the Mountain or Melisandre, but more on that later. Meanwhile, I don't see what the show would gain by killing off Sansa in the final season. Since leaving King's Landing, Sansa's made a series of smart, tactical choices, proving to be a pretty savvy Lady of Winterfell. She deserves to survive and carry on her Stark family legacy beyond the end of the series. But moving on to someone who has already died, Jon, or Aegon, I guess. I'm gonna stick with Jon. Now you could say Jon has already suffered for his past mistakes. Actually, lately, his character almost seems a little too invincible, like surviving all of the Battle of the Bastards and the Frozen Lake expedition. Saying that's some thick plot armor. It definitely seems like the show is saving him for a final confrontation with the Night King. But beyond that, I don't know if the show really needs him to rule the future of Westeros. It's almost like the most interesting part of Jon's life is what we're seeing in the events of the show. I don't know if I really care about an epilogue with him. The same goes for the show's other protagonist, Daenerys. Now, I don't think she really deserves narrative punishment, but she's always been more of a conqueror than a ruler. In fact, in season 7, the focus with her shifted more to what comes after she breaks the wheel, having a successor. I think the show's whole purpose of bringing her and Jon together was to produce a child. And I think that child will be their legacy to rule after the winds of winter have subsided, with the child being their dream of spring. There is definitely a reason the show chose to intercut Jon and Dany's boat sex with the flashback of the other dragon and the wolf, Jon's parents Rhaegar and Lyanna, while Tyrion watched outside looking very concerned. We were meant to see this dragon and wolf as doomed, not meant to survive this war, just like Jon's parents didn't survive that war. So I predict that we're going to see the death of Jon, perhaps while taking down the Night King in one-on-one combat, or by saving Daenerys in some way. Meanwhile, I think it's totally plausible that Daenerys will die in childbirth, like her mother did, and like Jon's mother did, and like Tyrion's mother did. Jeez, prenatal healthcare sucks in this world. It's just after rewarding these two with rebirth and sparing them from death so many times, I think it would be profound of the show to end their lives after their purpose to this overall narrative has been fulfilled. To break the wheel of the Iron Throne, to save Westeros from the brink, and to produce a legitimate heir to lead the way into the next generation. But the show will need some leadership brains to help bear that torch, and that's why I think Tyrion will survive. Now, it's clear George R.R. Martin has a soft spot for the character, and despite how different Martin has tried to make Game of Thrones from the Lord of the Rings series, I predict Game of Thrones will end similarly to Return of the King, with this world finally recognizing the contribution of the small. I actually have a more specific, kind of weird prediction about Tyrion in the final shot of the series in my other predictions video. And I think this attention must be paid payoff will also go for Sir Davos and Samwell Tarly in the final season. Both of them have spent their journeys as really the smartest men in the room whom no one really listens to, who ended up being two of the most pragmatic sources of conscience and knowledge in this known world. Sam with book smarts and Sir Davos with sea smarts. And let's face it, both of these guys get an inordinate amount of screen time. Clearly the writers love writing for them, and I take that as a good sign that the show plans to reward these guys with survival. I also think that sets up the possibility that Sam's survival, along with probably Gilly and her son, to write all of these events down in a new history text called A Song of a Nephew and an Aunt F***ing on a Boat. Or maybe Sam will come up with something more poetic. Meanwhile, I don't think Game of Thrones requires the survival of the Greyjoys to make any thematic statement. Both Euron and Theon have enough blood on their hands to make their deaths dramatically justified. For Theon, actually, I think sacrificing himself for a noble cause, like killing his uncle and rescuing his sister, Yara, might be the only way he can really redeem himself at this point. Now, the final primary character here is the Night King. We don't know enough about him to say whether he deserves to die. Like, is he even alive? Did the Terminator deserve to die? Because that's pretty much what he is. Now, a big part of me wants to see the Night King succeed in whatever his goals are. Like, I definitely want to see him shatter the Iron Throne and rain blue fire on all the cities of Westeros. But then what? What kind of ending is that? Nature wins? Oh, barf. I think in order for Game of Thrones to end with enough satisfaction of the world having changed, the Night King and the White Walkers must be vanquished. I just hope that the show will have enough balls to pay a heavy price for that victory, and rob a few main characters of happy storybook endings. Now, moving on to the rest of the cast. Supporting characters characters can die for those aforementioned reasons as well, as punishment for mistakes, or as game changers. But let's face it, they can also die for slightly less meaningful reasons. Their deaths can be used to motivate other characters into action. They can be used to show another character's treachery. And sometimes they're killed for pure shock value, to pay off fans wanting to see them go in the most violent way possible. So, will Game of Thrones do this to any of our beloved supporting characters? Yeah, I think so. So first, I think Beric Dondarrion, Tormund Giantsbane, Dolorous Edd, and anyone near the Wall is in serious danger. The show just made a huge statement by closing season 7 with the Night King destroying a chunk of the Wall. And I predict they'll kill off at least one of these characters to add emotional stakes to the Night King's threat. That said, even though I think he's at the Wall right now, I think Gendry is probably safe. I don't think the show would reintroduce him at the end of season 7 just to kill him off right away at the beginning of season 8. As the surviving spiritual and genetic successor to Robert Baratheon, I think he'll carry on his father's legacy. Like if Arya doesn't die, maybe he'll join her on whatever her new adventures are. Starks and Baratheons back together again. Now, the characters who are protectors and right-hand warriors, characters like Grey Worm, Jorah Mormont, Brienne, Bronn, I think these guys are all on the chopping block too. For example, I could see Grey Worm and Jorah dying as tragic foils to send Dany, as well as Missandei, spiraling into despair and guilt. However, Bronn seems like the kind of cunning survivor who's just ruthless enough, but not totally heartless for the show to allow to survive. Brienne, as a character, has already been thrown in harm's way, a bear pit, as motivation for another character, Jaime. I could see Jaime coming to rescue her again, or for her to rescue Jaime, but I think for Game of Thrones to kill her off would undercut the journey her character has taken. Game of Thrones is a show that celebrates these misfit toys. So, like Tyrion, I think Brienne will end the series rewarded for her life of torment, with Tormund, or better yet, the handsomest person in Westeros. And by the way, if Brienne survives, I think that would bode well for Podrick as well. Like, I think they'd only kill off Podrick to make us sad, or to teach us a valuable lesson about STD prevention. For Yara Greyjoy, I think one of the Greyjoys needs to survive to carry on the family legacy, and I predict after Euron and Theon kill each other off, Yara will survive as the first female leader of the Iron Islands, the rightful winner of the King's Moot in season 6. Now, when it comes to characters like Varys and Lady Melisandre, this past season cryptically foreshadowed their deaths.
I have to die in this strange country. Just like you.
In Melisandre's case, I think that death may come at the hands of Arya. Remember, back in season 3, when Melisandre took Gendry, she said this to the girl with a look of fear on her face.
I see a darkness in you, and in that darkness, eyes staring back at me. Brown eyes, blue eyes, green eyes. Eyes you'll shut forever. We will meet again.
And I predict Arya will have a chance to fulfill this promise. Actually, I'm curious to see what happens here, like if Melisandre returns to her true appearance, that of an old woman. Like in that case, Arya would see how this woman hid herself behind disguises in order to manipulate people, which is a lot like what Arya does. Meanwhile, for Varys, I think his death is way more of a mystery. Like Melisandre could have just been implying he'll die in this strange country, just way later in his life, like not in any sudden, unexpected way. And as someone who has always claimed to act for the good of the realm, I would hope that if Varys dies, it's in a way that saves lives. For example, maybe like killing Qyburn to prevent him from using wildfire to Qyburn down King's Landing to get the White Walkers out. I don't know, I think it'd be kind of fun to see these two like fight it out. Either way, I'm assuming that if Cersei dies, I don't think her hand, Qyburn, will survive the final season either. Like this guy's past experimentations are gonna blow up in his face sooner or later. Like maybe with the mountain turning on him like Frankenstein's monster, or him realizing suddenly that his machinations he invented to defeat the Night King are useless. Speaking of the mountain, yeah, season 7 finale definitely promised a showdown between the Clegane brothers. It's interesting that we've actually seen 2 past duels displaying the monstrosity of the mountain. A first round against his brother in season 1 at the Tourney of the Hand, and then a second round against the Viper in season 4. And the final season is promising a third act knockout that I think will be even more violent.
You know who's coming for you.
And when we're talking about the Hound, returning the favor for the facial scars and confronting his fear of fire, the 2 qualities that so define his character, would be an interesting way to make the Hound's death meaningful. But I kind of feel like we're owed a reunion between the Hound and Arya. It's actually interesting how these 2 have affected each other so much that their personalities have essentially flipped. Arya has become more of a ruthless killer, while the Hound has become a more empathetic, conscience-driven softie. So I would love to see both of their final chapters intertwined, putting putting themselves in harm's way for each other in one last duo suicide mission. Maybe for both of them to go after the villain each of them want to kill the most, the Mountain and Cersei Lannister. Now, there are a bunch of other, even smaller characters that could get interesting deaths, but I could also see the show not bothering to wrap up their stories at all. Edmure Tully, Robb Arryn, Jaqen H'ghar, Lyanna Mormont, the Citadel Archmaesters, Sam's mother and sister, Daario Naharis. We'll see what happens with these guys. But instead, I want to end on the beloved beasts of this show, the remaining direwolves, Ghost and Emeria, and the dragons, Drogon and Rhaegal, and the resurrected white dragon Viserion. Other than Viserion, I don't want any of these animals to die. I kind of hate it when the pets have to go. Now, in the past, Game of Thrones has historically used these animals as scapegoat figures, taking a bullet for a primary character in order to save them, to spare them blame, or to increase the shock value of their humans' deaths. And of course, in Viserion's case, it was to change the game. In my other predictions video, I predicted that we'll see a dragon against dragon battle in the final season. So unfortunately, I do think we'll lose another dragon, maybe all three. And I really do worry that if the last two direwolves return, it'll be to sacrifice their lives for Jon and Arya, the way Summer did for Bran. And if my predictions are right that Jon and Arya don't survive the end of the series, I don't think their direwolves will either. That said, George R. R. Martin has promised that the ending will feel bittersweet. And I think if the dragons die, it would be very interesting for them to do a similar thing with Drogon or Rhaegal that I'm predicting the show will do with Jon and Daenerys. Leave a legacy as a metaphorical dream of spring. And I think in the dragon's case, it'll take the form of a dragon egg. Think about it this way. If the final season does end with the death of Jon, aka Aegon, which is commonly shortened to Egg, maybe instead another egg will be around to keep their baby warm. So to recap, people I think will die next season: Cersei, Arya, Jon, Dany, Theon, Euron, and the Night King, and the dragons, the direwolves, the Mountain, the Hound, Melisandre, Varys, Beric, Jorah, Tormund, Grey Worm, and Qyburn, leaving the survivors as Sansa, Jaime, Bran, Sam, Gilly, Ser Davos, Brienne, Bronn, Gendry, Yara, Missandei, Podrick, Jon and Dany's kid, and a dragon egg. Wow, that is a lot of dead characters that we love. Anyway, tell me how accurate you think these predictions are. Who do you think will be the most shocking death of the final season? Will the show have the nerve to kill off Jon or Daenerys or Arya? Let's keep this conversation going in the comments below. You can tweet any predictions or theories that you have to me at EA Voss, or follow New Rockstars at New Rockstars for updates about our videos. You can share this video and subscribe to New Rockstars for more Game of Thrones videos. We want to keep discussing Game of Thrones throughout the months between now and season 8. And you can help us decide exactly what kind of videos to do by joining our team and contributing to us on Patreon. We actually created a poll where our patrons can weigh in on what kind of subjects to cover. So get on that, join the team, and a big thanks to all of our donors, especially Kenny Smith. All right, thanks for watching. Bye.